The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Kensington Palace as Camilla Parker Bowles walked through the corridors that once belonged to Princess Diana. Her heels clicked against the polished stone, each step echoing through the quiet halls. She had been staying in the East Wing temporarily while renovations were being completed on her usual quarters. But something felt different today. The air was thick with tension, and the usually friendly palace staff seemed to avoid her gaze. Camilla had always known that living in Diana's former spaces would be complicated. The late Princess of Wales had left an indelible mark on these rooms, and her memory lingered in every corner. The floral wallpaper Diana had personally chosen still adorned the walls, and the large windows overlooking the gardens still held the same view that had once brought comfort to the mother of William and Harry. As Camilla made her way to the morning room where she typically took her tea, she noticed Senior Palace Guard James Morrison standing rigidly at attention near the doorway. Morrison had served the royal family for over 20 years, and his weathered face usually carried a warm expression. Today, however, his features were set in stone, his jaw clenched tight as he watched her approach. The Queen Consort had grown accustomed to the whispers and sideways glances that followed her through palace corridors. Even years after her marriage to King Charles, some staff members still struggled to accept her presence in spaces that held such sacred memories of Diana. But Morrison's expression was different today. It wasn't just disapproval she saw in his eyes. It was something closer to anger. Camilla paused at the threshold of the morning room, her hand resting on the ornate brass handle. The room beyond was bathed in golden sunlight, and she could see her usual breakfast setting laid out on the antique mahogany table. Steam rose from the silver teapot, and fresh flowers from the palace gardens had been arranged in a crystal vase, the same type of arrangement that Diana had favored during her years at Kensington. Morrison stepped forward, his military bearing unmistakable even in his civilian palace uniform. His voice, when he spoke, was measured but firm, carrying the weight of years of loyal service to the crown. The morning light caught the medals on his chest, reminders of his dedication to the royal family and the solemn oaths he had taken to protect them and their legacy. The confrontation that was about to unfold had been building for weeks. Palace staff had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Camilla's extended stay in Diana's former wing. While officially she had every right to occupy any part of the palace, the emotional reality was far more complex. The staff who had served Diana remembered her kindness, her laughter echoing through these same halls, and her genuine care for everyone who worked within the palace walls. Morrison had been one of Diana's favorite guards. She had always greeted him by name, asked about his family, and remembered personal details about his life. When she died in that tragic car accident in Paris, Morrison had stood vigil at her coffin, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks as the nation mourned their beloved Princess of Wales. The memory of that day still haunted him, and seeing Camilla in Diana's spaces felt like a betrayal of everything he held sacred. The tension in the corridor was palpable as other staff members began to gather at a respectful distance. Kitchen maids peered around corners, footmen found reasons to linger in nearby hallways, and even some of the senior household staff had positioned themselves where they could observe the unfolding drama. Word had already spread through the palace's intricate network of servants' quarters and staff rooms that something significant was about to happen. Camilla could feel the weight of their collective gaze upon her. She had faced public scrutiny for decades, weathering storms of criticism and controversy with remarkable resilience. But this felt different. These were the people who kept the palace running, who maintained its traditions, and who had loved Diana with genuine affection. Their disapproval cut deeper than any newspaper headline ever could. The morning room seemed to mock her with its beauty and tranquility. Diana's personal touches were everywhere, from the family photographs arranged on the side tables to the books she had loved, still sitting on their shelves as if waiting for her return. Even the way the curtains were arranged spoke of Diana's particular taste and attention to detail. Morrison's hand moved to his radio, a subtle but clear indication that he was prepared to call for additional security if necessary. His action sent ripples of anticipation through the watching staff members. In all his years of service, Morrison had never had to forcibly remove a member of the royal family from any part of the palace. The very idea seemed unprecedented, almost unthinkable. But as he looked at Camilla standing in the doorway of Diana's former sanctuary, Morrison felt the full weight of his conflicted loyalties. He served the crown, which meant serving King Charles and, by extension, his wife Camilla. Yet he also served the memory and legacy of those who had come before, including the woman who had brought such warmth and humanity to these cold palace walls. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions and buried resentments. Camilla's own thoughts raced as she tried to process the situation unfolding around her. She had known this moment would come eventually. The collision between her present reality and Diana's enduring legacy. No amount of official protocol or royal decree could erase the emotional bonds that tied these spaces to the memory of the people's princess. Behind Morrison, she could see other guards taking their positions, their faces grave and professional. The palace had protocols for every conceivable situation, but nothing in their training manuals had prepared them for this particular moment. How does one forcibly remove a queen consort from rooms she has every legal right to occupy? Yet how does one ignore the collective will of staff members who had loved and served Diana with unwavering devotion? The morning light continued to stream through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like spirits from the past. The very atmosphere seemed charged with the weight of history, memory, and conflicting loyalties. In her mind, Camilla could almost hear Diana's laughter echoing through the halls, a haunting reminder of the woman whose shadow she could never fully escape. Morrison's radio crackled to life, and a voice on the other end requested his status. He looked directly into Camilla's eyes as he responded, his voice carrying across the silent corridor. The staff members who had gathered to witness this unprecedented moment held their breath, knowing that whatever happened next would be talked about in palace corridors for years to come. The confrontation that had been simmering beneath the surface of palace life was about to explode into the open. Years of suppressed emotions, conflicted loyalties, and painful memories were converging in this single moment. Camilla realized that no amount of royal protocol could shield her from the human cost of occupying spaces that belonged, in the hearts of those who served there, to someone else entirely. As Morrison took a step forward, his intention becoming unmistakably clear, Camilla felt the full weight of Diana's legacy pressing down upon her. The palace walls seemed to close in around her, and she understood that she was about to face one of the most humiliating moments of her royal life. The woman who had waited decades to become queen consort was about to be ordered out of rooms by a palace guard, not because she lacked the legal right to be there, but because she lacked something far more important: the love and acceptance of those who kept Diana's memory alive in their hearts. Morrison's voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk. The words he spoke would later be remembered by every staff member present as the moment when decades of suppressed tension finally erupted into open conflict. His military training had taught him to follow orders without question, but his personal loyalty to Diana's memory had reached a breaking point that no amount of protocol could contain. The queen consort's face flushed crimson as Morrison's directive hung in the air between them. Never in her years as a member of the royal family had she been addressed with such direct authority by palace staff. The watching servants shifted uncomfortably, some covering their mouths in shock while others nodded in silent approval of Morrison's unprecedented action. Camilla's first instinct was to assert her authority, to remind Morrison of exactly who she was and what rights came with her position. But as she looked into his determined eyes, she saw something that made her pause, not just defiance, but genuine pain. This wasn't about protocol or hierarchy. It was about love, loss, and the sanctity of memory that transcended royal rank. Behind Morrison, the corridor had filled with more palace staff than Camilla had ever seen gathered in one place. Kitchen workers still wore their aprons dusted with flour from the morning's baking. Housekeepers clutched their cleaning supplies as if frozen mid-task. Even some of the senior administrative staff had emerged from their offices, drawn by the electric tension that seemed to pulse through the palace's ancient walls. Lady Margaret Thornbury, who had served as Diana's private secretary for several years before the princess's death, stood among the crowd with tears glistening in her eyes. She remembered the countless mornings she had spent with Diana in that very morning room discussing charity work, family matters, and the princess's hopes for her son's futures. The sight of Camilla about to enter that sacred space felt like witnessing a desecration of holy ground. The radio on Morrison's belt crackled again, and this time it was clear that word of the confrontation had reached the upper levels of palace administration. protocol demanded that security incidents involving senior royals be reported immediately up the chain of command. Within minutes, this unprecedented standoff would be known to the king's private secretary, the Lord Chamberlain, and possibly even King Charles himself. But Morrison seemed unconcerned about the potential consequences of his actions. His weathered hands remained steady, his posture unwavering as he faced down the woman who had married his former employer's successor. In his mind, he wasn't defying the crown. He was protecting something precious that the crown itself should have safeguarded. Camilla's personal protection officer, who had been discreetly positioned nearby, stepped forward with obvious discomfort written across his features. His job was to protect the queen consort from all threats, but what did protocol dictate when the threat came from within the palace walls themselves? His training had covered terrorist attacks, paparazzi invasions, and public demonstrations, but nothing had prepared him for a palace guard ordering his charge to vacate royal premises. The morning sun had climbed higher in the sky, and its rays now illuminated the portraits of past monarchs that lined the corridor walls. Their painted eyes seemed to watch the drama unfold, silent witnesses to a moment that would challenge the very foundations of royal protocol and personal relationships within the palace. Young Sarah Collins, who worked in the palace florist department and had only been employed for 6 months, found herself witnessing history in the making. She had heard the older staff members speak of Princess Diana with reverence and love, sharing stories of her kindness and genuine interest in their lives. Now she was seeing firsthand the depth of loyalty that Diana had inspired, a loyalty so strong that it could drive a career palace guard to risk everything in defense of her memory. Morrison's voice, when he spoke again, carried the weight of collective grief and unresolved anger that had been building among palace staff for years. He had watched Camilla gradually assume more prominent roles within royal life, had seen her occupy spaces and positions that had once belonged to Diana, and had witnessed the careful erasure of Diana's presence from official palace life. The confrontation had now attracted attention from beyond the palace walls. A kitchen worker's cousin, who worked for a London tabloid, had already received a frantic text message about the drama unfolding at Kensington Palace. Within hours, newspaper editors would be scrambling to verify reports of an unprecedented confrontation between palace staff and the queen consort. Camilla's mind raced as she processed the impossible situation in which she found herself. Retreat would mean acknowledging that she lacked the moral authority to occupy Diana's former spaces, potentially undermining her position within the royal hierarchy. But pressing forward risked escalating the confrontation into a physical altercation that would be infinitely more damaging to the monarchy's reputation. Lady Thornbury stepped forward from the crowd, her aristocratic bearing evident despite her emotional state. As Diana's former private secretary, she carried unique authority in matters relating to the late princess's legacy. Her voice, refined by years of diplomatic training, carried clearly through the hushed corridor as she addressed Camilla directly. The words Lady Thornbury spoke cut deeper than any of Morrison's commands. She spoke of Diana's love for those very rooms, of mornings spent planning charitable endeavors that would help millions of people around the world. She described Diana's careful attention to every detail of the morning room's decoration, how she had personally selected each piece of furniture and every flower arrangement to create a space that reflected her warmth and humanity. Camilla felt the collective weight of their memories pressing down upon her like a physical force. These weren't just employees following orders. They were people whose lives had been touched by Diana's genuine compassion and interest in their welfare. Their loyalty wasn't based on royal protocol or hierarchical obligation, but on love earned through countless small acts of kindness and recognition. The palace's ancient walls seemed to absorb the tension, adding this moment to centuries of royal drama, triumph, and tragedy. But this confrontation felt different from the usual palace intrigue. This wasn't about politics or succession or ceremonial precedence. This was about the human heart and its capacity to love someone so deeply that even death couldn't diminish that devotion. Morrison's radio erupted with urgent communications from palace security headquarters. Multiple supervisors were demanding immediate reports on the situation in the East Wing. The palace's elaborate security protocols had been designed to protect the royal family from external threats, but they offered no guidance for internal rebellion based on emotional loyalty to a deceased princess. As word of the confrontation spread through the palace's complex network of corridors and service areas, more staff members began to converge on the scene. The head gardener arrived still carrying pruning shears, having abandoned his work tending Diana's memorial rose garden. The palace librarian came clutching a biography of Diana that she had been cataloging. Even some of the stable hands had made their way from the palace mews, drawn by reports of the unprecedented standoff. The crowd had grown to include nearly 50 palace employees, representing every department and level of the complex hierarchy that kept royal life functioning. Their presence transformed what had begun as a confrontation between Camilla and a single guard into something approaching a palace-wide revolt against her occupation of Diana's former spaces. Camilla realized that the situation had spiraled far beyond anything that could be resolved through appeals to royal protocol or assertions of her legal rights as queen consort. She was facing a rebellion of the heart, a collective expression of love and loyalty that no amount of official authority could overcome. The very people whose service made royal life possible were telling her in the most direct way possible that she had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The moment of truth arrived when Morrison took another deliberate step forward, his hand moving to his communication device one final time. The assembled palace staff held their collective breath as decades of suppressed emotion reached their breaking point. Camilla found herself at the center of a storm that no royal training could have prepared her for, facing the raw power of human loyalty that transcended all official protocols. The Queen Consort's personal protection officer moved to intervene, but Morrison's fellow guards stepped forward to block his path. These weren't random acts of insubordination. They represented a coordinated expression of collective will that had been building among palace staff for months. The carefully maintained facade of royal harmony was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Lady Thornbury's voice rose above the tension as she began to recite specific memories of Diana's time in these rooms. She spoke of the morning Diana had received news of a successful operation to restore sight to hundreds of children through one of her charities. How the princess had wept with joy while sitting at the very table where Camilla's breakfast now waited. She described Diana's careful selection of the artwork on the walls, each piece chosen to reflect themes of compassion and hope. The emotional weight of these memories proved overwhelming for several staff members, who openly began to weep. Mrs. Henderson, who had served as head housekeeper during Diana's residence, spoke through her tears about the princess's habit of personally thanking every member of the cleaning staff, remembering their names and asking about their families. She recalled how Diana had insisted on using the finest china for her morning tea, not out of personal vanity, but because she believed that beautiful surroundings inspired beautiful thoughts and actions. Camilla felt her resolve beginning to crack under the relentless pressure of their collective memories and emotions. She had always known that she lived in Diana's shadow, but she had never fully understood the depth of love and loyalty that the late princess had inspired among those who served her. These weren't just employees protecting their workplace, they were guardians of a legacy that transcended royal rank and official position. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor, and everyone turned to see Sir Edmund Fitzgerald, the Lord Chamberlain, striding toward them with obvious urgency. His arrival transformed the dynamics of the confrontation, as his authority superseded that of everyone present except Camilla herself. The staff members parted to allow him passage, but their faces remained defiant, their loyalty to Diana's memory unwavering even in the face of potential disciplinary action. Sir Edmund's expression revealed the impossible position in which he found himself. As the senior official responsible for palace operations, he had to maintain order and respect for royal hierarchy. Yet he also understood the profound emotional currents that had driven his staff to this unprecedented act of rebellion. He had served during Diana's lifetime and had witnessed firsthand the genuine affection she had inspired among everyone who worked within the palace walls. Morrison stood at rigid attention as the Lord Chamberlain approached, his military bearing perfect despite the revolutionary nature of his actions. He showed no sign of backing down or apologizing for his defiance. Instead, he met Sir Edmund's gaze with the same unwavering determination that had driven him to confront Camilla in the first place. The Lord Chamberlain's words, when they came, surprised everyone present. Rather than ordering the staff to disperse and demanding Morrison's immediate suspension, he acknowledged the legitimacy of their emotional concerns while gently reminding them of their professional obligations. His diplomatic approach reflected years of experience in managing the complex human dynamics that existed within royal households. But Lady Thornberry was not to be deterred by diplomatic language or appeals to professional duty. She stepped forward again, this time producing a leather-bound journal that she had carried with her since leaving Diana's service. The journal contained detailed records of the princess's daily activities, personal thoughts, and charitable work, a treasure trove of memories that brought Diana's presence vividly back to life in the minds of everyone listening. As Lady Thornberry began to read excerpts from the journal, the corridor filled with Diana's own words, her thoughts about the morning room, and what it meant to her as a sanctuary from the pressures of royal life. The princess had written about her hope that the space would always be remembered as a place of warmth and compassion, where important work was planned and genuine human connections were forged. The impact of Diana's own words, read in her former private secretary's voice, was devastating in its emotional power. Several of the younger staff members, who had only heard stories about the princess, found themselves moved to tears by this intimate glimpse into her private thoughts and feelings. The morning room represented more than just royal accommodation. It embodied Diana's vision of what royal service could and should be. Camilla realized that she was not just being asked to leave a room. She was being asked to acknowledge that some spaces, some memories, were too sacred to be claimed by anyone who hadn't earned the right through genuine love and service. The staff weren't rejecting her personally. They were protecting something precious that they feared would be lost forever if not actively defended. Sir Edmund found himself in an impossible situation. Palace protocol demanded that he support the Queen Consort's right to occupy any part of royal residences. But the emotional reality before him suggested that forcing Camilla's presence in Diana's former spaces would create a permanent rift between royal authority and the people who made royal life possible. The confrontation reached its climax when Morrison finally spoke the words that everyone had been waiting to hear. His voice carried the weight of collective determination as he formally requested that Camilla vacate the East Wing immediately. The request wasn't framed as an ultimatum or threat, but as a respectful appeal based on love for Diana's memory and concern for the emotional well-being of palace staff. The Queen Consort looked around at the faces surrounding her. Faces filled with pain, determination, and an unshakable loyalty to a woman who had been gone for decades, but whose influence remained as powerful as ever. She realized that no amount of royal authority could overcome the simple truth that these people had loved Diana in ways that transcended official duty or hierarchical obligation. In that moment of perfect clarity, Camilla made the decision that would define her relationship with palace staff for the remainder of her reign. She stepped back from the morning room's threshold, her voice quiet but clear as she acknowledged the validity of their concerns. Her withdrawal wasn't a sign of weakness or defeat. It was recognition that true royal authority came not from position or protocol, but from earning the respect and affection of those who served. The collective sigh of relief that swept through the assembled staff was audible, and several people openly wept with gratitude and emotional release. Morrison's rigid posture finally relaxed, though his eyes remained watchful and protective. Lady Thornberry clutched her journal to her chest, her mission to preserve Diana's memory having achieved an unexpected and complete victory. As Camilla walked away from the East Wing, escorted by Sir Edmund and followed at a respectful distance by the gradually dispersing crowd of staff members, she carried with her a new understanding of the complex legacy she had inherited. Diana's influence extended far beyond official royal duties or public appearances. She had touched individual lives in ways that created bonds stronger than steel and more enduring than stone. The morning sun continued to stream through the tall windows of the East Wing, illuminating empty corridors that would remain Diana's in all the ways that truly mattered. The confrontation was over, but its impact would resonate through palace life for years to come, serving as a reminder that some legacies are too powerful to be displaced by protocol or position, and that love, once earned through genuine compassion and service, becomes eternal in the hearts of those who experienced it.